All right, welcome back. We are going to do lots of math. And today we are starting 4.3, which is more on solving equations literally, which is so funny that it says literally right here. So whenever it says this practice understanding business, that means like you know enough. So now we're going to start practicing a bunch. So today we're going to be able to compare strategies for solving linear equations and literal equations. A literal equation is just like a formula. So instead of seeing all of these numbers in here like this, you'll see more variables, and that's it. Absolutely, hon. Okay, so you all were trying this, so I'm going to do numbers 3 and 4, and your job is to compare the steps of number 3 to the steps of number 4 and see if that makes sense. Yes, yes. Okay, here we go. So what would I do for first step number 3? What would I do as my first step to number 3? Yeah, very good. Someone says, Miss Johnson, add 5. And the reason why we're adding 5 is because if you're thinking about SADMAP, that works here, right? So I see there's subtraction and I undo it by addition, and I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So then I'm left with 4x divided by 3 equals to 16. Okay, so I did, let me see. I did subtraction and addition, and I'm going to ask, is there division or multiplication? Is there division or multiplication here on the x side? And everyone's like, yes, I see both. And you can actually get rid of both at the same time. Some of you actually see this, and it depends on how you see this, what makes the most sense for your next step. So I'm going to go through a couple. Some of you see this as a fraction being multiplied by a number. So the way you get rid of a fraction being multiplied is you divide. And then you all know that if we divide by a fraction, we're really multiplying by the reciprocal. So you see this as, let me multiply this by the reciprocal. Yeah, absolutely. So someone just asked a really good question. Could we think about this as, what number could I put here that would be true? Essentially, what number divided by 3 gives me 16? And absolutely, you can do it like that. The only hang up that I will say is when you move over here, that's where your issue might go, because we're not thinking about what number fits. We're trying to find the expression that fits, right? Okay, so for those of you who see this as 4 times x divided by 3, then you're going to multiply by 3 and then divide by 4. So I'm going to look at this as a fraction because that's the way I see it. So then if I'm going to deal with a fraction, then I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, 3/4. And the reason why I could do that is because I'm really just dividing by the fraction. That's how you undo multiplication. And when we divide by a fraction, we're really multiplying by the reciprocal. You should see 2 1s here. Here's a big 1 right here. And you should see another big 1 right here. It looks like an X, but that's not what I'm trying to draw. So hopefully you see that. Okay. So then that is just a 1 and that is a 1. So 1 times x is just left with x. And do you see this as 16 divided by 4? Do you guys see this as 16 divided by 4? Okay, if you don't see as 16 divided by 4, I think about everybody on the top being multiplied and everybody on the bottom being a divider. So I don't know about 3 divided by 4, but I do know about 16 divided by 4. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. So I'm going to go 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 4 times 3 is 12. So this is what I think my answer is. And if you didn't do that, if you did 16 times 3 is 48 divided by 4, you would still get 12. Okay. But for me, my strategy is also always going to be make my numbers smaller, because then I can calculate in my head super quick, rather than pull out the calculator kind of thing. Okay. So how would you check this answer? Remember, this is the chapter of redemption. So this means the quiz that we're going to have coming up is going to be the quiz of redemption, meaning it's going to raise your grade if you do this these couple of things, right? If you know these couple of things, very good. Check your answer. Now, normally I wouldn't check my answer because I'm trying to get it in your head that you should be checking every single piece of problem on this coming up test. I'm going to do it. So it says 4 parentheses over 3 minus 5. I want it to be equal to 11. And then I'm going to plop my 12 in there. Literally going to plug it in. That's what plug it in means. I'm going to put it in there. So I get 4 times 12 is 48. Hey, that's what I said earlier. Divided by 3 minus 5. So that's 16 minus 5 is 11. Is this true? This is a question. Is 16 take away 5, 11? Is that true? And you all are like, yes. And then Miss Johnson, she drives her big, big happy face. Why is she very happy? Because again, this is called the chapter of redemption. Right? Very good. Okay. So I want you to compare these steps here. Now I'm going to move everybody up a little bit. So just so I can squeeze this guy in here, just moving him up a little bit. I want you to compare the steps of this to the steps of this. If you're trying to solve for X, I'm going to highlight him, right? I'm highlighting him. I want everybody, I don't know, maybe he has the cooties. I don't know. But we need to isolate him. We need to get him by himself. So I'm still going to use SADMAP. I'm going to ask the same questions. On the X side, do you see subtraction? And everyone says, yes, I see subtraction. And then I would say, okay, well, how do you get rid of subtraction? You guys would say what? Yes, by adding what though? Here's the question. What are we adding? Here we added 5, but here we're going to add 5y. Everyone say yay. If you said add 5y, pat yourself on the back, clap for yourself. I'm clapping for you very lightly because apparently my daughter makes fun of me that I clap really loud. Okay, adding 5y. Hold on. Please wait. Please wait. Okay. So if you notice, negative 5y plus 5y, that's a 0. So I'm just left with 4x over 3 equals to, now Ms. Johnson, 11 plus 5 earlier was 16, but 11 plus 5y isn't. Yes. So we're just going to write it exactly as we see it. 11 plus 5y. Unless you know what 11 plus 5y is, leave it alone. Does that make sense? Unless you know what 11 plus 5y is, then leave it alone. So you can't add 11 plus 5y because they're not like terms, right? This guy has a y, this guy doesn't. That's like adding 11 $1 bills and 5 $5 bills and being like, I got 16. 16 what? What do you have 16 of? Hopefully you don't say I have $16, right? Because that would be wrong. Okay. Then we get here, this part here. How do you get rid of 4/3? How are we getting rid of 4/3? How do we undo 4/3 times x? Yeah, very good. So some of you are seeing this as 2 steps. Let's multiply by 3, divide by 4. Some of you are seeing this as 1 step. Let's divide by that fraction, 4/3. Some of you already see, oh, Ms. Johnson, we have to make him do a handstand. And so it's 3 multiplied by 3/4. Everyone right now, go ahead and multiply by 3/4 on this side. And think about how Ms. Johnson would write it on this side. How do you think she's going to write multiply by 3/4 on this side? Okay, there's a wrong way, obviously, and a very right way. Okay, are you guys ready to see what I did? Okay, I'm going to show you the right way. So this is 3/4, and you all see how 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So on this left side, we have x is equal to, right? Everyone see how we only have x, and you guys are all excited because you're like, look at Miss Johnson. My x is by himself. And I say yay to that. Very good. I'm going to actually leave him as a fraction. Some of you converted him to a decimal. That's okay. But I will tell you right now, because I know what's coming in 2 years, be comfortable with fractions. Don't be uncomfortable. Okay. So I'm going to show you the wrong way. This is the wrong way. Yeah, decimals are a little bit more challenging for me too. This is the wrong way. What am I missing? Someone already put it in the chat. Yeah, I need this parenthesis here because this 3/4 needs to be multiplied by the whole side, not just by 11. Notice here, you multiply 3/4 by 16, not just by the 11, right? So here's your answer, 3/4 times 11 plus 5y. When we say this, we say it like this. We say 3/4 times the quantity of 11 plus 5y. Does that make sense? So here's my answer. I am done. Notice the steps are still the same. Add 5y. Multiply by 3/4, multiply by 3/4. Done. The only thing is we couldn't add these two together, so we left it. And the other thing is we had to multiply by the whole thing. So this is almost like distribution, but I'm not going to distribute. I'm just going to leave them exactly like that. I'm just going to leave them exactly like that. All right, let's continue. So the whole point of this, by the way, all of these numbers here, is that if you forget how to do it using with variables, just kind of like use numbers instead. And that was our strategy for the last session too, right? So I want you to practice these over and over again. It says write a verbal description for each step of the equation solving process used to solve the following equations for x. Solve your description should include statements about how you know what to do next. For example, you might write, first I blank. The reason I could do this is because of blank. Oh, sorry. I didn't see your hand up. Yes, ma'am.
It's actually for the last problem.
Yes.
Why don't we distribute? Because are we just not supposed to, or is it like taking it too far or something?
Let's see. They asked you to solve for x, right? And so the moment that your x is by himself, you're done. Now, would it be wrong if you were to distribute? No way. So is it taking it too far? No. It's just, I will say this, one of the things that I notice about mathematicians, and you guys are all mathematicians because you're humans that do math, right? Is that you're efficient as possible and you don't necessarily do things extra because you don't know if that next step you're doing is going to be undone by what you are going to have to do next. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I could leave it like this. For those of you who are like, ugh, this bugs me. My teacher would make me simplify this. This is actually simplified. Yeah. So if you're unsure and you're like, Ms. Johnson, should we distribute here? Go back to your question and say, did I solve the following equation for x? And your answer here is yes, because look, x is by himself. Right? Very good. Thanks for helping me. All right, so this one, I want you to start. I'm going to have you try this one on your own. We're going to pause the video. We're going to try one of these on our own. So this looks crazy because there's all sorts of letters. But again, all I want you to do is like, it's almost like when you focus hard, I want you to focus hard on this X and blur everything else out and use SADMEP to see if you guys can come up with an answer. Okay. If you need to, you can also do the thing where you start with X and you make a list of what happens to X first, according to PEMDAS, second, third, and fourth. Okay, I'm going to give you probably about 2-ish minutes to try this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go step by step. And I like to use SADMEP, which is PEMDAS backwards, like parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. The caveat I do have to say here is that there is an invisible set of parentheses around the numerator and denominator. So I'm going to put that in there so you know that all of this stuff inside the parentheses is stuck in the P. right? So I got to get rid of everything outside the parentheses in order for me to, work with that stuff or undo it, inverse it, whatever you want to say. So the very first thing I ask is, hey, do you see any subtraction or addition on the X side? And then so some people say, yes, that plus B and that minus D. But in reality, you don't see the plus B because he's stuck inside parentheses. So I'm going to ignore him. But I am going to deal with this minus D. So how do you inverse minus D? And so we say we're going to add D to both sides. Okay. And you'll notice here that when I add D minus D plus D, it equals to 0. So this is a 0 right here. So we're going to, people say cancel it out. I don't really like cancel because I'm just saying it equals to 0. Okay. So what am I left with on this side? I'm left with AX plus B on the top divided by C. So AX plus B over C. And again, I'm going to use that invisible set of parentheses and I'm going to make them seen so that way you remember why I can't touch that plus B. And then on this other side, I have E plus D. Now, students get really creative on what they think E plus D is, but it's literally just E plus D, right? E plus D is an F. E plus D isn't whatever letter that you could think of it. It's not ED because that would be E times D. It's just literally E plus D. Okay, so I did subtraction and addition. So then I move on to the next one. Do you see division or multiplication? And you're like, yes, I see that C. And some of you still see this AX, which is good. But remember, he's stuck inside the parentheses. So I'm going to ignore him. So I'm going to multiply by C, multiply by C. Now here's where I tell my students, can you think about how Miss Johnson's going to write multiply by C? So some students just do this where they just multiply the C by E, but that's not correct because you're supposed to multiply the whole thing by it. Okay. So like earlier when we did this problem up here and we multiplied 3/4 by both sides, we multiplied it by the whole 16, not just the 11, not just the 5, but the whole thing, 16. So that means I need to multiply it by the whole thing. So when I say the whole thing, that should conjure up in your mind, oh, she wants me to put parentheses around there. Okay, she wants me to put parentheses to denote the whole thing. So one more time, the reason why I'm multiplying C times E plus D is because you need to multiply it by both sides, the whole thing. So C divided by C becomes 1. And this is now correct. Okay. So if you have anything else besides this, I mean, you could also have CE plus CD because you distributed it out. But I tend not to distribute because I don't know what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to leave it exactly like this. All right. So what do I have left? I have AX plus B equals to C times the quantity of E plus D. Okay. So then because I'm here, I'm technically inside these parentheses. I'm going to SAD map again, right? I'm going to go backwards through that. So do you see any subtraction or addition? And you're like, yeah, I see the plus B. And so I'm like, okay, well, how do you undo adding B? And you're like, oh, subtract B. Very good. So you're going to subtract B from both sides. My computer's running a little bit slow here. So you're going to subtract B from both sides. And this is where people like to make up stuff. So I'm going to make you pay attention very closely. Now, on this side here, can you imagine the B minus B would be 0? So that's equal to 0. So I'm only left with AX on this side. So this is equal to 0. Ugh, you are getting so slow. Hold on a second. There it goes. Okay. That makes sense, right? Because AX plus B minus B, that's just a 0. Now here, this is where people make up all kinds of stuff. Is the minus B inside the parentheses? No, so leave them outside the parentheses. Does it say C minus B? No, so leave them outside the parentheses. I'm literally going to write it like this and see if that makes sense. So C times the quantity of E plus D minus B. And then the last step is, do you see any multiplication and division? And you're like, yeah, I see it right there. So I'm going to divide both sides by A. Be very careful here. I'm pulling that fraction bar across that whole thing. So it's divided by A. So A divided by A is just the number 1. So I'm left with X is equal to C parentheses E plus D parentheses minus B all over A. So here's your answer. Again, because we call this the chapter of redemption, right? That means that you should definitely check your answer if you have time during your test, right? So I would just check to make sure that I did everything correctly, that I didn't miss any steps, and it makes sense completely. All right, so hopefully this SADMAP is helping you understand in which order you're supposed to take care of which variable, or in our case, numbers, right? Have a great day. Thanks for listening.